Hello, and thank you for joining us as we embark upon an epic journey aboard the beautiful Silversea Silver Moon. This will be a 5-part series as we journey from London, England to Reykjavik, Iceland. Part 5 will be all about the Silver Moon, the ship tour and dining guide. Part 5 will also contain some of the pros and cons, ups and downs of this journey. We arrived early in the morning at Heathrow Airport after an overnight flight from the USA. We were picked up by a limo driver sent by Silversea, who whisked us away to our hotel for the next 2 days, the Chelsea Harbour. The Chelsea Harbour was not our hotel of choice, and it was to have been the Conrad St. James, but logistical problems kept us out of the Conrad and put us into the rather tired and dated Chelsea Harbour Hotel and Spa. Please check out part 5 of our series for a little bit more information on the hotel change. Since we arrived at the Chelsea Harbour early in the morning and check-in would not be until about 3, we had a lot of time on our hands. So we decided to go off in search of Buckingham Palace. Much of our walk took us along the banks of the River Thames, where we saw many houseboats that were interestingly high and dry when the tide is out. As we searched for Buckingham Palace, our walks took us through streets both residential and commercial. Eventually, we found our way and approached Buckingham Palace, passing by the Royal Mews or stables. As we approached Buckingham Palace, we found that it was, of course, closed to the public. But open or closed, the crowds were certainly there. These are our friends, George and Allison. When George removed his backpack to take this picture, we found that instead of looking like it should on the left, someone had walked behind him in the crowd crush and opened every zipper. Fortunately, what he had in the backpack was deeply buried within the backpack, and there was no theft. After a quick coffee break near the palace, we headed back to the hotel, collecting 2 more travel companions, and headed off to dinner at Rabbit. Rabbit is a forage and farm-to-table restaurant in the Chelsea area of London, and was quite good with items like the mussels in saffron broth and cured trout that you just saw, pork tenderloin with fennel and spring onions and a red wine sauce, wild halibut in a chive and caviar sauce, and this beautiful and delicious butternut squash ravioli, just to mention a few. The next morning, we decided to get all touristy and set out to find some of the more iconic sites. The London Eye, or Millennium Wheel, completed in 1999 and opened to the public in the year 2000. At 443 feet high, it was the tallest Ferris wheel in the world, but has been subsequently eclipsed by several even taller wheels. Crossing Westminster Bridge, we came face to face with the British Parliament building and the Westminster Bell and Clock Tower, renamed in 2012 as the Elizabeth Tower, often called Big Ben as a nickname honoring the largest of the 5 bells housed in the tower. Behind Parliament and Elizabeth Tower stands the Westminster Abbey complex. The larger buildings of the Abbey complex were begun in the early 11th century by Edward the Confessor. Edward is buried there along with 18 British, English, and Scottish monarchs. At least 40 kings and queens have been coronated at the Westminster Abbey. As we continued our tour of London, we found several war memorials, neat little parks, and green spaces along our path. Graffiti did not seem to be as much of a problem as we've seen in other parts of Europe, with only some examples of it being where it shouldn't be, and other examples of being where it should be, as in this area under a bridge that had been converted into a skate park. Other examples of artwork appeared as we continued our journey. The last touristy box to be checked was to get a glimpse of the Tower of London and Tower Bridge. Docked very near the Tower Bridge is the HMS Belfast. Now a museum, the Belfast was launched in 1939 and distinguished itself in World War II. Straddling the River Thames is Tower Bridge. Completed in 1894, it is still heavily used and sees up to 40,000 crossings a day. Standing nearby is the Tower of London. Built by William the Conqueror in 1078, the castle and fortress were built to keep William safe from the Britons he had just conquered. With all of our touristy boxes checked, it was time to meet up with all of our friends for dinner. And dinner tonight would be in Chinatown. And while KFC looked tempting, we had a reservation at Joy King Lao, where we would try some of their noodle dishes and dim sum. Every dish we sampled that night, from the noodles, radish cakes, and the many different style of dim sum dumplings. Even the chicken feet were good. After dinner, while our friends went shopping, we hopped on a bus that was supposed to take us close to the hotel. Long story short, it didn't. Instead, it dropped us off about 3 miles from the hotel. Now, we could have called an Uber, but where's the fun in that? So we decided, since it was a pleasant evening, that we would just walk. This little 3-mile stroll brought our total mileage for the day up to about 14. As we were getting a little closer to the hotel, we noticed those same houseboats that we saw the other day, high and dry, were now floating. The tide had come in, and the River Thames, while not at its highest, was at least high enough to float the boats. The next day was embarkation day. To get a few steps in early, we decided to do some walking on the Riverwalk behind the hotel. The Riverwalk in this area appeared to be populated with luxury apartments and condominiums. After our pleasant little walk, it was time to board our chariot and head off on what turned out to be about an hour-and-a-half drive to Southampton. Processing through the terminal was quick and easy, and we were soon aboard the Silversea Silver Moon. The terminal sky bridge led us to Deck 5, a glass of champagne, and Dolce Vita. Dolce Vita is a large public space that houses guest services, entertainment in the evenings, and a bar. When our suites were ready, we went to check out our accommodations. We opted for something a little bit different this time and booked the lowest cost suite Silversea had to offer. The Vista class suite is only slightly smaller than a regular veranda suite, but has no veranda. After unpacking and a quick whirlwind tour of the ship, we had our first dinner on board at La Terrazza. La Terrazza is the breakfast and lunch buffet aboard the ship that transforms into an authentic Italian eatery in the evenings. The restaurant features fresh pasta made daily, as well as authentic and delicious Italian fare. Watch part 5 of our series for our complete restaurant guide, ship tour, and the ups and downs, pros and cons of this trip. The next morning brought us to Falmouth, England. Located on the stunningly beautiful and rugged coastline of Cornwall, the city of Falmouth sits on gentle rises spilling down into the harbor. Silversea includes at least one excursion at every stop for no charge. Unlike some other cruise brands where the included excursions can be just a bit lame, the included Silversea excursions are actually quite nice. For our first excursion ashore, we chose a hike along the rugged Cornish coastline on the Lizard Peninsula. Lizard Point on the Lizard Peninsula is as far south as you can go and still be in Britain proper. The Lizard Peninsula and its trails are maintained by the National Trust. Most of the land here is still active farms, and the animals on those farms, including sheep and cattle, also move along those trails at times, which makes it very important to watch more than just your footing, keeping an eye out for materials left behind by those animals. As we hiked through the English countryside past the hedgerows, animals, and fields, we started to catch glimpses of the Cornish coastline. This is Lizard Point, the southernmost spot in all of England. And here is a nice shot of Britain's most southerly cafe. After a short stop, we were back on the trail. In the distance is the old Lloyd's signal station, now a private residence. Fully restored and now a museum stands the Lizard Lighthouse. The lighthouse was built in 1752 and fully automated, no longer requiring lighthouse keepers in 1998. One of the more famous temporary residents of the Lizard was Guglielmo Marconi. In 1900, Marconi performed a series of groundbreaking wireless radio transmissions, proving that shore-to-ship and ship-to-shore transmissions could actually be received over the horizon. There is still a volunteer-staffed coastal watch station overlooking the coast that keeps an eye out for mariners in distress. As we made our way back into Lizard Town, we stopped and had some lizard ice cream, shopped some lizard souvenirs, looked at some lizard pastries, and boarded our bus for the ride back to our ship. As we arrived back in Falmouth, the most important thing on our minds was, hey, what's for lunch? And as you can tell from the Asian music, we decided on kaiseki for lunch. Kaiseki is one of the 2 restaurants on board that carries an upcharge for dinner in the evenings. But kaiseki is also open every day for lunch for no additional charge, serving sushi, sashimi, and noodle bowls. We frittered the rest of the afternoon away before going to get all gussied up for formal night. And since everyone was all dressed up, we decided to stop at the Salt Bar for before dinner drinks. The Salt Bar is located on Deck 4, and is a small, intimate space reminiscent of a speakeasy. It was here that my wife had to try the very interesting drink, Silversea the Moon. The Salt Bar specializes in interesting cocktails, or if you are uninterested in Silversea the Moon, I can highly recommend their version of a bourbon old-fashioned. Dinner this evening would be in Atlantide. Atlantide is one of the larger dining venues on Silversea Silver Moon and has the largest menu featuring daily specials and an always available selection. The menu at Atlantide focuses on a surf and turf sort of theme. Check out part 5 of our series for a restaurant and dining guide aboard the Silver Moon. After dinner, and since we were still all gussied up, we decided to go to the theater. Tonight, the Silversea singers and dancers were presenting a British invasion tribute. The next morning, we docked in Fishguard, Wales. Wales is one of the 3 countries making up the island of Great Britain, along with England and Scotland. And adding the 4th country of Northern Ireland, you get the United Kingdom. We had a wonderful welcome to Wales, with a Welsh choir showing up to serenade us, and a kind Welsh lady handing out tasty Welsh miners' cakes. For our outing today, we had decided on another hike, and leaving Fishguard, we proceeded to St. David's Head and Cairn Yeadie. To get to our destination, we had to take some, exceedingly narrow roads where only one vehicle can pass at any given time. And as we sometimes say here in the United States, those with the most metal win. Most vehicles made way for our rather large bus. Interestingly, although the excursion is called St. David's Head and Cairn Yeadie, with a picture of St. David's Monastery featured prominently on the propaganda for the excursion, we only glimpsed St. David's Monastery and the tiny town of St. David's from the highway. The total time of this excursion was taken up by a stunning view and hike along the coastline of Wales, along a peninsula called St. David's Head. During the hike, we had the chance to ascend the Warrior's Dyke. The Warrior's Dyke is a defensive position engineered by Neolithic man about 3000 BC. The Warrior's Dyke is a rocky tumble that is very difficult to ascend, but easily defended once you are up there. A small village or tribe would retreat up the Warrior's Dyke, where they had enough resources to kind of hold out until their enemy gave up and went away. Just below the Warrior's Dyke is a tomb marker called Arthur's Quoit. It is unknown who is buried there, but it is estimated that the stone was erected around 3000 BC, likely by those same Neolithic tribesmen. When we returned to the bus, our tour guide serenaded us with a typical Welsh song. Upon our return to the ship, we changed clothes and got ready for dinner, with a before-dinner drink in the Panorama Lounge. I had a well-done bourbon old-fashioned, while she had an interesting pineapple daiquiri.
Oh, very nice. Thank you.
And tonight we were having dinner in the Salt Kitchen. SALT is an acronym for Sea and Land Taste, a new cuisine initiative by Silversea. The menu features dishes for the region that you are in or will be in at some point during the voyage. More about the Salt Kitchen in Part 5. Just for fun, we headed back up to the Arts Cafe, where at this time of night, the Arts Cafe is all things chocolate. Chocolate liqueurs, chocolate lollipops, chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. And the next morning, we docked in Liverpool, England, on the River Mersey. Now, if you're an old dude like me, you may remember the hit song, Ferry Across the Mersey, by Jerry and the Pacemakers. And I'm talking the 1964 version, not the 1989 remake. Jerry and the Pacemakers and fellow contemporaries, the Beatles, helped establish Liverpool as the Music City. Now, as our travel companions set off in Liverpool with the goal of finding Penny Lane, we opted instead to take a 40-mile journey to the city of Chester, known as the Roman city of Chester. It was founded by the Romans in the 1st century AD on the river Dee, where they built the fortress Diva. Some of the Roman structures still remain in Chester. Chester is a cathedral city, and the Chester Cathedral dominates the skyline. This clock was dedicated to Queen Victoria, and according to our guide, is the second most photographed clock in England. The streets of Chester are lined by these Georgian buildings, and one of the most intact city walls still standing in England. Some of what appears to be Georgian architecture in Chester is Nouveau or fake Georgian. We were told that the best way to tell whether it's Nouveau or original Georgian is original Georgian buildings tend to be leaning and holding each other up. Chester is definitely a touristy city, but at the same time holds something for everyone. The Chester Cathedral, not originally designated as a cathedral, may have started as a simple basilica soon after the Romans arrived in the 1st century AD. In 1093, it became a Benedictine monastery. In 1538, during the dissolution of monastery system in England, the monks disbanded and the church and grounds were in sort of a religious limbo. But in 1541, by the order of King Henry VIII, the church was redesignated a cathedral of the Church of England. Many of the pews have carved figurines that are supposed to indicate who sits there. The carvings, in fact, lampoon those people, indicating this was a lazy man and his family, and this was a heavy drinker. The architectural style of the church is said to be a mixture of Romanesque and Gothic. The cathedral still provides religious services to the community, as well as hosting a number of events throughout the year. The church and grounds can now be rented for certain secular activities, and even has a small cafe and gift shop. Our timing couldn't have been better, as Chester was celebrating the Midsummer's Eve festival. From street performers to buskers, and even a parade where the community participates. So get ready for it. Here comes the Midsummer's Day parade that celebrates the occasion with a mixture of the Christian religion and paganism. A parade and festival has been more or less continuously celebrated since 1195 to 1678, when it basically disappeared or went underground. The parade and festival was revived by Chester in 1995. The parade is only slightly cut back, but I will post the parade in its entirety a little bit later on as a bonus. Meanwhile, enjoy the parade. With the parade finished, and having dodged a rainstorm in the local shopping center, we again continued our exploration of Chester. And while we were in Chester, our travel companions decided to find out a little bit more about Liverpool, or Music City. Liverpool is a city of about 500,000 inhabitants, sitting on the banks of the Mersey River. Full of interesting architecture and a rich maritime heritage, Liverpool became famous for the sound of the Mersey beat and later on, its most famous sons, the Beatles. And since this is what our friends set out to see, mission accomplished. And so from the Roman city of Chester in Penny Lane in Liverpool, we returned to the ship, and it was time to sail away. Tonight, it was dinner in Silver Note on Deck 7. Silver Note is a concept style of restaurant serving small plates considered modern tapas. At some point in time during your seating, a jazz duo consisting of a pianist and a singer will perform for you during dinner. More about the Silver Note in Part 5 of our 5-part series on the Silver Moon. Well, that's it for part 1 of our 5-part series, London, England to Reykjavik, Iceland. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and stay tuned for the rest of the series, including part 5 will be a few of our thoughts on the Silver Moon and Silversea, the Silver Moon itself, and our Silversea dining guide. Happy travels, and I hope to see you next time for part 2 as we travel to the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Scotland.